to the command post. You know what it is. Post up. Take command. I, of course, am your commander-in-chief, Louie T. Thank you for joining me. So, day number 1 of the NFL draft 2023 is in the books. Washington Commanders make their selection at 16, taking cornerback Emmanuel Forbes out of Mississippi State. We've talked about him as a potential selection. I mocked him in my Washington 7-round mock as the first-round pick. And we knew that this was a guy that they were very, very interested in. Had him for a official visit at the facility. Met with him at the combine as well, pro day, all of that good stuff. So they were really smitten with Emmanuel Forbes, and they make the selection. I want to know how you guys feel about the selection. We talked about it last night on the draft party. Obviously, we're going to talk about it ad nauseum. We're going to talk about it today. We're going to talk about it tomorrow and the day after that, and until we see this guy on the field and figure out if this was a good decision or not. With Christian Gonzalez on the board, I think that's the biggest conversation right now was, did they make the right decision between the corners that were on the board, taking Emmanuel Forbes over Christian Gonzalez? So I've talked to my one source, and from what I've gathered, there were 2 factors that swung the momentum in the favor of Emmanuel Forbes. Now, if you listen to Ron and Martin Mayhew, they've been talking about turnovers as a key this offseason. So I've always told you guys, Ron doesn't lie to us, okay? And Ron hasn't for the most part. And I said, just listen to what they say. They generally tell you what's about to happen. And they were very adamant, specifically Ron, this offseason in particular, about wanting to get more turnovers. And so the first thing that I was told is that the ball production was just undeniable. And comparing him with Christian Gonzalez, who only had 4 career interceptions, and all 4 of them came this year, that was a problem for Washington. That was a problem for the staff, that they felt like, although Gonzalez is a smooth athlete, you know, had all the traits you were looking for in terms of size, length, speed, you know, and the ability to play the football, the production just wasn't there consistently. And a lot of his interceptions, and, you know, you don't want to nitpick because Forbes had some tip drill interceptions and things of that nature. But, you know, a lot of Gonzalez's interceptions weren't the variety that gets you excited necessarily. There were 1 or 2 in there that you say, hey, that's a hell of a play, you know. But for the most part, I don't think they were blown away by the production. It wasn't consistent, and it all came in 1 year. Not to hold that against him, but when you're comparing it to Emmanuel Forbes, who, you know, had big-time interception years, multiple years. This is a 3-year starter. You're talking about, you know, 5 1 year, like 6 another year, and 3 another year. Like, this is consistent. This is what he does. He takes it away. It's hard to deny that. So that was the first thing that I was told. And then the other thing was the lack of physicality. It was a problem for Washington. They did not like the way Christian Gonzalez attacked in the run game. And they said that that was something that they just couldn't get past. And I don't blame them. Again, I've said this about Gonzalez, and there are going to be a lot of teams. This is why a lot of teams love Devon Witherspoon. There's no denying physicality. Okay? You can't hide it. You can't try to sugarcoat it. When I sit down with you, if you're a prospect and I'm watching tape, I'm going to ask you, what was this? What kind of effort was this? You know, what were you thinking here when you just turned that guy loose, essentially? Or you're seeing your teammates fight to push this guy backwards and you're watching them. What were you thinking here? Because we can't have that up here. We get a guy to the outside, and I got to know that my corner is going to, at worst, send him back inside to the help. But I want my guy to go up and make a tackle. And that's not what you're doing. So walk me through your thought process as you're doing this right now. You know, teams had problems with Christian Gonzalez. That's top 10 talent we're talking about, Gonzalez. But he falls to 17 because of the lack of physicality. And that's something the Patriots will probably try to iron out with him because they demand physicality out of their corners. But Washington, they were more so fixated on the ability to take the football away, his competitive spirit. He's one of 10 kids. So competing was something he's done all of his life. So there were different attributes that they liked about Emmanuel Forbes. Obviously, they like his size. They like his length. I shouldn't say size. They like his height and his length. Obviously, they want him to get bigger, and they've talked about him getting bigger. But um, he played in the SEC, and you cannot deny this. Okay, Christian Gonzalez played, and again, if we're comparing the two, he played his entire career in the Pac-12. Started at Colorado, transferred to Oregon, and that's where he played his collegiate football. The SEC is literally the minors for the NFL. I mean, it's the step right below the NFL. And so if you can play 3 years of SEC football, compete at the highest level, win the Jim Thorpe Award, which he won this year that means you're the nation's best corner, and also pick it off 14 times and return 6 of them to the crib for touchdowns, that speaks volumes in the SEC. We know the type of talent that comes out of the SEC at the receiver position. We know the type of talent that comes out of that conference at quarterback. And he was able to play 3 years as a starter, 35 games, and pretty much not miss a single game. And that's something else Ron and Martin Mayhew were very adamant about, was his durability. For all the talk about size, this is a guy that really didn't miss any time. So there are a lot of things to like. And I told you, I don't hate the pick. The biggest thing that I'm going to be focusing in on with this whole situation is I want to see what Gonzalez does. And it's still hard to compare because New England deploys a different scheme and they're going to utilize him differently than we might have done. But I'm going to be paying attention to Gonzalez to see what he turns into. And we're going to watch Emmanuel Forbes and see if he does the things that they drafted him to do. Ultimately, I think this is a really good pick. I don't have any issues with it. But the talent, to me, Gonzalez was higher of that than Emmanuel Forbes. However, for what they want to do, for the scheme that they're going to run, which is a lot of zone, and we play a lot of zone match scheme, that's what you saw Forbes do on tape for the most part, is play a lot of zone match. Come up, press and bail, match, guys coming into his zone, they're pattern matching. And so it's a matchup zone where it essentially turns into man down the field, and he thrived in that environment. And so I think that this is something that, again, swayed them in that direction. And I don't hate the pick. A lot of people went to bed mad last night. I wasn't one of them. But I want to see how this turns out because I did want Gonzalez when he was on the board. But I can't be mad at them for making the decision based off of the information that they had. But they also said they hadn't fielded any phone calls. No one called. The phone didn't ring. I told you I didn't think we would be able to get out of 16. And Martin Mayhew said the phone rung a ton last year. Not so much this year. The phone didn't ring at all. I didn't think it would. Like a lot of people saying they could have traded back and still got Forbes. Says who? This is not the type of draft where teams were looking to come up. Okay? Early in the draft, yeah, when there was some stuff there that all the elite stuff was gone outside of Gonzalez. All the elite stuff was probably gone already. And clearly, Gonzalez wasn't viewed as elite by the entire league because the Patriots were comfortable trading back 3 spots and were okay with losing him had he been selected. And so they were happy he was still there, but they didn't care if someone took him. So again, nobody was coming up to take Gonzalez or anybody else for that matter off their hands. And so they made the pick that they felt like they needed to make. So at the end of the day, I want to know how you guys feel about the pick. A lot of you, I thought, handled it well last night. I think you guys learned from Jahan Dotson last year. A lot of you lost your shit last year when Washington passed on the opportunity to get Chris Olave, and also the safety from Notre Dame was still on the board and you wanted him as well. And they passed, obviously, on the opportunity to take him, and then the Ravens took him. And we get back to 16 and end up getting Dotson. And a lot of you lost your minds last year, and then cooler heads prevailed, and you realized, damn, we got a really good football player, and we picked up some draft capital. I think a lot of you learned from that last year. And so I think many of you took let's just see what happens. Let's take a wait-and-see approach. I like the player. And I don't think this was ever about the player, Emmanuel Forbes. I think it was just about, hey, there was another guy here available that we didn't expect to be. He was here, and we should have taken him. Now we're going to see what ultimately happens. I want to know how you guys feel about the pick. Leave it down in the comment section. Emmanuel Forbes here in Washington, first pick. Now we move to day number 2. I'm going to give you a little bit of insight as to what I think is ultimately going to happen. So Ron and company keep talking about the depth on this roster, feeling really good about where we sit and not feeling rushed and forced into anything. So we'll see what they decide to do. Ultimately, I think offensive line is going to be a big time, point of emphasis in round number 2 in particular. Round 3 is interesting because I think if a guy like Overshown is available at linebacker in the 3rd round, I wouldn't be surprised if they took him. I think it's going to be a player like that potentially piques their interest in the 3rd round. But if not, I could see them going, maybe running back at pick 97. I could see them going with hybrid nickel safety type, because one of the questions that was asked of Ron and company about where Forbes will fit on the field and who's going to play in the nickel, they said, we'll figure it out when we get on the field. So they're going to have to figure out what's going on at nickel, or you could just draft one. If Brian Branch is still available at 47, which I doubt, maybe you pull the trigger on him. There'll be some options available to them at 47 on the offensive line. There'll be some options available to them at running back at 47. There'll be some options at tight end at 47. I think this is where Eric Bieniemy starts to get involved and maybe have a little bit of input. Maybe because Jack Del Rio wanted a guy like this. They talked about Jack's input here and Jack telling them, we need to take the football away. We need a guy like this that's a ball hawk. Maybe now Eric Bieniemy gets in their ear and says, hey, I need a running back, or I need a tight end. So we'll see if any of those things ring true in day number 2. But I think the first pick is going to be an offensive lineman. And then I think the board, and Ron kept saying the same thing over and over again, and I do subscribe to this, the board is going to have to speak to them. You got to see what is happening in front of you before you can then make a decision. So it's hard to say what I think Washington is going to do. I can only give you a position because we don't know what players are ultimately going to be available come 47. So offensive line is where I think they ultimately spend their next pick. And then in the 3rd round, linebacker is very intriguing. Even though they feel like they've got their starting middle linebacker, a guy like Overshown, if he's available, I think kind of fits what they're looking for as a hybrid linebacker, slash safety type of player that can come down in the box, be aggressive, kind of give you some more depth at linebacker behind Jamin Davis. Overshown kind of fits that bill, and I know they like him as well. So if he's available in the 3rd round, maybe a guy like that is someone that they take a look at. Obviously, they've got other needs. Defensive end is another position. Obviously, with every single defensive end on the roster being on 1-year deals, essentially, you've got to assume that they're going to attack that position at some point. It would make a ton of sense for them to do that. Maybe a 3rd round selection makes sense for them there. There's so many different places that they could go with that 3rd rounder, but the 2nd rounder is, to me, offensive line. But what do you guys think? Leave all of that down in the comment section. What do you think that they're going to do? What do you want them to do in day number 2 with their 2 selections? Do you want them to trade back, pick up more picks? Do you want them to stay where they are and make 2 selections? What 2 positions are you looking to target? Leave it down in the comment section along with how you feel about the Emmanuel Forbes pick at number 16. That's going to do it for me, your man Louie T. Don't forget, we're live again tonight. Draft party day number 2, starting at 7 p. We'll be here breaking it all down, and we'll be here for both Commanders picks and all of the other picks that will be made in day number 2, rounds 2 and 3. So join me, your man Louie T, as we chop it up and have fun as only we can for day 2 draft party here on the Louie T Network. That's going to do it for me, your man Louie T. You know what it is. Post up. Take command. You guys have a good one, and see you later on tonight. Louie T.